Hi, and welcome back to Next Third Best Third. I'm David Fenwick, your founder, your host, and today I'm going to talk a little bit, well, the whole time, about what it is to truly like yourself and how important it is to like yourself. I have worked with so many men over the last decade, and one of the big challenges that I continue to see in guys is kind of this self-flagellation, this beating up of themselves, truly not even really liking themselves. I'm a Christian, and Jesus says that all the law and the prophets are fulfilled in loving God, in loving others as you love yourself. And that very thing has been something I've wrestled with for a long time. I don't know about you, but self-love, saying, do I really love myself? That has never been my strength. And it's really over the last few years that I've really had some major breakthroughs in that. And I've always been a good lover of people. So, I just keep thinking, man, if I could ever really love myself, how much better would I love people? But the question came to me several months ago. Okay, there's loving yourself, and love is this big, hard to define thing. But one day I was like, but do I even like myself? Because you can kind of get your teeth, sunk into that. What does it mean to like yourself? And I did an exercise with a group of guys one day, and we were all together. And I said, let's just go around the room here and tell one another something you like about yourself. It could be multiple things, but what do you like about yourself? And there was probably, 20 guys in that room, and I think probably 8 of them couldn't give an answer. 12 of them did, and out of those 12, a couple of them were kind of, they were nothing real solid, but about 8 of them couldn't even say what they liked about themselves. And so we dug into that a little bit, and I started to realize this is a major problem, and it's a major problem for guys. I'm sure it is for women too, but men tend to fall into the trap of comparison. I know women do because of self-image, the whole thing that society has done to women. But men compare themselves in ways that are real unique. Our jobs, our earning power, our physique, of course. We compare ourselves as far as our spouses, how well our kids are doing. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And comparison is just one of the greatest enemies a man could have, right? Comparison, because once we start comparing, we fall into this trap, and we start to say, this person's better, this person's worse, and next thing you know, you're just pulling back, and you're just kind of going through the motions in life. So I was thinking about, okay, what are some of the ways that we could learn to like ourselves, right? What are some tools? And I've written down a few here, but I think first and foremost, it just comes down to self-acceptance. Self-acceptance. I was talking with someone today, a friend of mine, and she said that, for liking yourself, she said, look at the attributes you've been given, that you've been born with, that God has given you. What are some of those attributes that you have? And start to really appreciate those, right? You might be compassionate. You might be a critical thinker. You might be somebody who makes friends easily. You might be somebody who's a problem solver. You might be someone who just sees the best in other people. Whatever your attributes are, if you could list those attributes and start being grateful for those, saying, hey, I like this attribute about me. So I was thinking about that before starting, and I was going down my little list of things in my life. And it was funny because the more I looked at those and the more I thought them through, it opened me up to other attributes that I had. And I was like going, man, I'm okay. I'm not as bad as I thought. But self-acceptance means liking those attributes. But it also, it means accepting your imperfections, right? Accepting your imperfections and your flaws as well as your strengths. Everybody has imperfections. Every guy, no matter how successful he looks, no matter how together his life seems, every guy has imperfections and flaws. And it's funny because a lot of times our very strengths, things that are our strengths, can also be our greatest weaknesses. I've always been somebody who wanted to encourage other people, right? I always wanted to see the best in other people. I always wanted to encourage others, and I always wanted to think, see them what could they be. And over the years, that actually, as good as that is and sounds, at other times it's come back to bite me. It's come back to hurt me because I would get taken advantage of, and I would find myself being kind of abused and used. So a lot of times your great strengths are also your weaknesses, but self-acceptance is first and foremost. I already addressed comparison. You can't get into the comparison game. If you're going to like yourself, you've got to quit comparing. And self-acceptance is a major step in that, right? Another thing is positive self-talk. Man, I can tell you that over the years, I have struggled with negative talk about myself. I've struggled with making statements, right, over myself like, man, you never get this right, or you always fall short, or you don't deserve this, and just being really kind of negative on my own behalf. I don't need an enemy. I don't need somebody, the little devil on my shoulder telling me all the bad things, because I do a pretty good job of it myself. And these last few years, I've really started to be intentional about positive self-talk. I started to, as a Christian man, I started to look in the Bible and see what God says about his creation, what God says, and some of the promises that I could grab hold of and speak over me. And, it can be as simple as saying that, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. God created me with a purpose. I'm loved. I'm forgiven. I have a hope and a future. And starting to just be positive about myself and partnering with things that lift me up and getting myself out of that habit, that really a terrible habit of just beating myself up with my own negative talk. Here's a big one to really start liking yourself is practice self-care. And that self-care is both emotional, mental, it's physical, right? It's taking steps and creating habits that prove to yourself that you're worth it, right? I've been big over the last 6-7 years in particular of really watching what I eat, really being careful of my intake, avoiding things that I know are bad for me, exploring new foods that I've maybe never eaten before, but that are proven to be good for you. I really am very intentional and purposeful about working out. Just making sure that I'm always active, that I'm honoring my own body. Mental health, my cognitive, my thought life. I already talked about speaking positive over myself, but really not wasting time. When I get home, I try to make sure that I'm investing in my own my thought life, my cognizant health, right? And so reading, not wasting time just being on the computer, going for walks even, I do grounding, I go barefoot in the grass, whatever it may be. But self-care is huge, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, making sure that you're not isolating, making sure that you're interacting with other people. This is all huge for you to start liking yourself. Another one that I love is gratitude. We spoke, last week we spoke about the reverse bucket list. And a reverse bucket list is when you list out the things that you've accomplished over your life. Instead of looking forward to the things and the goals you want to accomplish, write down the things you have accomplished, no matter how small, no matter how long ago, and to look back at your life. And it creates a sense of, first off, of real gratitude. And in that sense of accomplishment, you start to say, hey, I've done pretty well. You might not be where you want to be, but look where you came from. Look at all the things you've done right. And that has been so helpful. So gratitude is such a big part of it, right? I've said this before, that gratitude, it really breaks the back of whatever enemy you have in your life, whether it's you believing lies, whether it's a doubt, whether it's the fears that you have. Have a life filled with gratitude. Look around you and be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for what you've accomplished. Look back and be grateful for where you came from. And that way you can be grateful for where you're going too, right? Another one is treating yourself with kindness and understanding. We can call that self-compassion. When you make mistakes, own it, right? Own them. You say, yeah, I did that. That was a mistake. But don't beat yourself up. Instead, say, okay, I've made a mistake. Where can I go from this point, right? Where can I go and how can I affect change? How can I utilize the things I've learned from my mistakes to better myself and to invest in other people? We always say at Next Third, Best Third that your mistakes, your past, your failures, your brokenness, your pain does not disqualify you. Rather, it uniquely qualifies you. Because once you've gone through these things, you actually get authority over them, and you're able to really speak into other men's lives. You're able to kind of help lead the way to those who are looking for help. I've shared this many times, but we all need 3 men in our lives, 3 prototypical men in our lives. It's the man who we admire, to aspire to be like, that man that we look at and we just say, man, that's a guy that I wish I could be like. And you kind of want to glean from him. Then you need the guys who are walking with you, and these are not just friends. These are guys who can help you with the hard things. They'll call you they'll call you out, so to speak. They'll challenge you. They won't let you get away with anything. I've got a good friend of mine in one of my men's groups, and I've been speaking about writing a book, my book on legacy. And we went to breakfast the other day, and he just called me on it. He says, okay, you've been talking about this for over a year. How's it going? And I said, well, I've just outlined it and these kind of things. And he says, no, you're going to get this book, and it's going to be published by the end of the year. And he said, by the end of today, I want these 4 things. He actually sent me an email, and it had 4 bullet points he wanted me to answer. He says, I need this by Thursday. So this was Monday. He says, by Thursday, I need this. And I did it, and I sent it to him. And then he said, that's great. That's a beginning. And then he sent me another assignment, so to speak. But what he's doing is he's holding my feet to the fire, right? And that I love, and it's so important. But the third guy that I want you to see that you need in your life is the guy who looks up to you, the guy that you can speak into his life. And a lot of times these guys don't come looking for you, but you can see them. And that's what I'm talking about being uniquely qualified, even through your mistakes, even through your failures, because you can share with men, you can share with other guys who are younger, guys who are coming from a different point of view, and really encourage them, saying, hey, this is how bad I blew it. My stories, my life, I share so much of my life with people. I'm pretty much an open book, but I've made so many mistakes. I've done so many stupid things, and I could kick myself, and sometimes I do, but I step out of it, and I found that when I share where I've come from, where I've shared the failures and what I've learned from it, and then the guys look at me and say, but look at you now. And I'm like going, yeah, look where I've come to, look how far I've come. And it gives them hope. They're like, hey, I can do that. So now they're starting to aspire to be like me. Another thing is to celebrate yourself, right? I think celebrating yourself is such an important thing. It's celebrating it's being proud, Pride in and of itself is not a bad thing, right? When you are proud of yourself, when you can celebrate yourself and do it in such a way that you remain humble and you remain grounded, that's super attractive. That's super powerful. And it's a way for you to really, really begin to like yourself. Pride is a funny thing. The negative pride, or the pride that we want to avoid is on one side of the coin is thinking too much of ourselves, right? Thinking too much, thinking too highly of ourselves, thinking that we're better than the other guy. It's still a comparison thing. See, comparison comes in there, and it's pretty diabolical. You can think, well, I might not be perfect, but I'm better than him. I'm better than those people. And the other side, though, is in its equal pride, is to say I'm the worst, right? I'm not as good as that man. I'm not as good as they are. I'm the worst of the worst. It's a coin called pride. On one side, you're thinking too highly of yourself. On the other side, you're thinking too lowly of yourself. But what pride really is thinking too much about yourself, right? It's having yourself being so self-focused. You're so self-focused that you're at the center of your life. And frankly, that's narcissistic. That's narcissistic. And we're not talking about doing that. When we talk about having pride in yourself, is being able just to take honest assessment, saying, I'm really good at this. I'm very good at gathering people. I'm very good at getting involved in men's lives and people's lives and giving them hope. I'm proud of that. That's something I'm very good at. I'm good at loving people. There's things I can't do. I am terrible with my hands. I don't do anything mechanical. I never have been able to. But I can do things that other people can't. And we should take pride. We should celebrate our strengths, right? And then the other thing that I think for setting to really get to the place where you like yourself is to honor your own boundaries, right? Honor your own boundaries. And what I mean by that is, I think some people talk about boundaries and they make them relational, like saying, I'm not going to let this person in here and I'm not going to let this person take advantage of me like that. But I'm talking about boundaries where you might have time constraints, right? You might have saying, hey, I want to make sure that I work out 5 times a week, and so that's something you really want to do. But how do you honor that? Well, what you can do is surround yourself. Like, that's a yes. I have a friend, Seth Dahl, who says this, and I love it. He says, once you get your yeses in life, right? And we all have to set up yeses. It might be, hey, I'm going to protect my time with my family. I've got a friend who Friday is he takes off, and he and his wife and the girls, Friday is their day, and he protects that. He protects that time. But so he's got a yes to his family on Fridays. It could be a yes to your workout schedule. It could be a yes to you, maybe something as simple as, I'm going to break some addictions in my life. I'm going to quit drinking or something like that. And that's your yes. What we have to do is learn to surround our yeses with no's, right? Learn to surround your yeses with no's. If you're going to take time, you're going to say, hey, this is going to be my family's time. I'm going to honor my wife and I'm going to honor my kids and we're going to spend this time together. You just surround it with no's. Somebody says, hey, can you help me move? No. Hey, you want to go do that? No. Hey, No. You surround that with no's. And what ends up happening is you start to get this sense of, this is important to me. And if something's important to you, that actually means you're important too, right? That's just kind of how it works. So when we talk about liking ourselves, we could all laugh at that, but I challenge you. I challenge you to take some time. I love it when you journal. I love it when I journal. Write things down, because when you write it down, you have time, you can go back over it. And there's just something powerful about writing it out. But I challenge you to take some time today, tomorrow, whatever it may be, and start to write down what you like about yourself. What do you like about yourself? What are some of the things you like about yourself? You might even ask yourself the question, do I like myself? And just answer that, Because if we can become men who like ourselves, that means we're men who we're content but not complacent, right? We're men who have purpose, but we also want intentionality to improve. It's like saying, if I like myself, I'm confident. I'm not comparing. And if I'm not comparing, that means I can look at other people through the proper lenses, right? If I'm confident and I like myself and I'm not looking at somebody comparing myself to them, I can start to see them for who they really are and not be fearful of them or not be trying to say, hey, that's competition, or, I don't want to be around that person. Instead, we start to look at others. And once you start to look at people and really see them, they notice, everybody's on a search for significance. And that search is to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. And so it's critical for us to be able to look at other people and really see them. And if we like ourselves and we're not comparing ourselves and we're not holding ourselves or other people to these standards, we're not operating out of that coin of pride saying, I'm not as bad as they are, or I'm better than he is, or I'm not as good as they are, I'm worse than anybody else. If we can really get to the point where we're comfortable in our own skin and we like ourselves, then it enables us to see people and to show people that they're significant. And more than anything else, that's what I really wanted to get to here was, we could just say, oh, it's, do you like yourself? Do you don't? But there's a purpose to liking yourself, right? If we're going to impact society, if we're going to impact our spheres of influence, if we're going to be intentional about building healthy relationships, about promoting emotional well-being, right? If we're going to help people overcome the lies they believe about themselves, we have to get to the point where we see them rightly. I always say it, I want to see them like God sees them, right? Through those lenses. I want to see with those eyes. There's a scripture that says that no longer do we want to view anybody according to the flesh because of the sacrifice of what Jesus has done, right? Because of his sacrifice and how God loves us so much that we don't want to view people through eyes of flesh. And what I think that means, or at least it means to us in this conversation, is, yeah, it's one thing to look at them in their flesh and their natural, but I don't want to look at them through the eyes of my own flesh. That flesh that compares, that has a distorted view of myself. I want to get to the place where I really truly like myself, because if I like myself, I can like other people too. And that leads me back to the opening scripture that I started with, to love others as you love yourself. It says, first love God, and we really do show God we love him by loving others as we love ourselves. And it begins with liking ourselves, being comfortable, accepting our flaws, celebrating our strengths, celebrating our accomplishments, looking back at life with gratitude, looking forward with great expectation and hope, right? So as we go forward, I just want to inspire and challenge and motivate you guys to take the time to be intentional. Don't just say, oh, I listened to that and that's fine, but really be intentional and write out the things that you like about yourself. Answer the question, do I like myself? And then also go back and say, how can I protect myself? How can I build upon liking myself even more? Because as you do, your influence is going to be so great because it's going to be pure. It's going to come from a pure heart. It's going to come from right intentions. And I tell you what, when you're around men who are not comparing, I'm around guys who are healthy and strong, and they do inspire me and they do motivate me. But the thing about it is I feel safe with them, right? I can be vulnerable with them. I can be safe with them. And that's what true masculinity is getting to the place where I celebrate myself. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I like myself. And by doing that, I become a safe place for other guys, a safe place. I become a safe place for my children. I become a safe place for friends. You become a safe place for your spouse, right? The world needs men who don't compare themselves to others. The world needs men who truly like themselves and see themselves rightly, so that they can see the rest of the world and the men around them and the people around them through the right eyes and give them hope and inspiration. So I hope that this helps you a little bit. I really enjoyed myself digging into this, preparing for it. But if this means anything to you, share it with somebody, right? I always value your support. I always value you subscribing, liking, commenting. But more than anything is I want you to really be intentional. And I hope that you're getting more and more intentional so that the next third of your life is going to be the best third, not just for yourself, but for those around you and in your sphere of influence. We'll see you next time.